Welcome to the Homegrown podcast. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today's guest is Chef James Barry. Chef James is 20 years in the culinary field, started as a private chef cooking for celebrities such as Tom Cruise, George Clooney, and Gerard Butler. In 2020, James launched his first functional food product, Pluck, an organ-based seasoning, and has since published a number of cookbooks. James, welcome to the show.
Hello, Liz and Joey. Great to be here.
Great to be with you. It feels like I'm with an old friend. We met in 2021 and 2022 back at Polyface.
Yeah.
So I remember meeting your team, having your seasoning, and seeing you there a couple years in a row. Just like seeing a familiar face when you're at an event like that just brings the whole thing together. You're like, oh, this is the community. I'm instantly like, I know who the people I'm with. So I love that we're on the show together.
And as you know, if you're at Polyface, you are part of a community, right?
Yeah.
It's a very tight and specific community that goes to Polyface.
What are these events that happen, and why have I not gotten to go?
Well, I never invited you. I took Sophie, so my oldest, I took Sophie one year, and then I took my mom and Sophie the next year, but they were events that Hilda Labrada Gore was putting on.
Hilda puts them on. I mean, the other organizations do as well, but just Polyface in general, to me, they're like the OG, you know? Yeah. And what's so fascinating about the agricultural business and Polyface and how they interface. So anyone that doesn't know, so Polyface, Joel Salatin, and now his son Daniel, they're kind of the ambassadors of Polyface. And Joel he's had books out. He's been on the forefront of just how to do agriculturally, do farming differently. And he's been doing it for, I want to say, 20 years at least. I mean, I remember him when I first started as a chef. And when we were there in 2020 or 21 or whatever it was, I asked him, I said, so Joel, are you finally getting the acknowledgement, of what you've been doing all these years? Are people finally kind of admitting like, oh, Joel has a point, or Joel is right? We don't have to do farming this way. We can do it this other way. And he said, nope, they just keep making new excuses. They keep saying, well, of course you can do that on 100 acres, but try doing it on 10,000 acres. And like, there's just always an excuse to not acknowledge this kind of regenerative way of farming and how important it is to not only humane animals, but just to a better planet.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how like he will just constantly face adversity there? I feel like we've had Will Harris on the show a few times of White Oak Pasture, and he kind of has a similar story, but I feel like is one of those OGs who's just like, listen, I took what was once conventional ag and I changed it back to the way it would have been, which is what we call now regenerative. But really it's just going back 3 or 4 generations. And, they all face adversity. I think anyone in the real food movement faces adversity, because anytime you go against the grain, anytime you do something different than what society is pledging, you're going to have people that are like, yo, that's just unrealistic. And I think, I once was that person that's like, no, I would never do that. I used to say things like, I would never give birth without pain medication. What a stupid thing to do. And now look at me. I'm like planning a home birth for the second time. Like it's wild how we all change, right? So total grace for the skeptic, but also some of these guys have been in it for 20 years, like yourself.
Yeah, long time. And isn't it interesting? Because I see, you guys get this kind of feedback too sometimes, this kind of trolling a little bit, is that, so you go down this path, right? So you started one place. We've all started somewhere and we've gone somewhere else. And usually what gets us there is contrast, right? We're doing one thing, and something suddenly isn't working. We experience something different about it. We experience someone else in a different place, and it inspires us to change, right? So then we change, and now we're on this new path, and then people try to knock you down while you're on this path. They're like, oh no, oh, you're trying to make money doing this, or you're trying, you're profiting off of homesteading. It's like, how could you? It's like, what? Like, why is that an issue? Like, we're learning how to do things differently. We're finding success at it. And why is that an issue? Why is success a bad thing within any industry? And one of the things that I have to give props to around this kind of like regenerative farming, carnivore, pro animal based movement. Well, I go to these conferences, I go to these farms. I've now been, kind of running Pluck for 4 years, and so I've been in these events and down in the dirt with everyone. And what I love about this community is that everyone is like, oh, we're not competing. We're all just rising tides. We're all just trying to help the movement, because the movement is more important than the individual company or even the individual. It's like the movement is we are promoting animal based eating, and we are promoting like very planet centric, healthy farming through regenerative farming. Like that's the movement. And I love that we all work together. And literally, I was like on a podcast for a organ meat supplement. So here I am usually talking to people about like, oh, I want you to eat supplements versus swallow them. And we're together doing a giveaway, or I'm on his podcast. It's like, and we're both like, yeah, I don't care how you get organ meats in your diet, just get them in your diet and pro animal, yada, yada. So
yeah, I love that. Speaking of people who have been in it for 20 years, I want to hear a little bit about your backstory, how you became this private chef for these celebrities, what that journey looked like through culinary school. I know you and Joey want to like swap notes a little bit. So take us back.
Yeah, Joey, do you want to make the comment so that everyone can drink their kombucha?
So I don't know if anyone knows this.
Taking shots.
But pre-business school, I did go to culinary school. I was in the restaurant industry. And whenever we have someone on like Chef James, I get super hyped because there's a culture and just world within the restaurant industry and being a chef, and just the expectations and the drive. But then also like even down to the nitty gritty of like when there were chefs that were mentoring me and coaching me and teaching me. Every chef is basically their own curriculum. There is no like there, at least from my experience, and I would love to hear what Chef James says about this, but like every chef was right. So if you dealt with a chef that was telling you how to make a Caesar salad, and then you dealt with another chef, one chef is going to tell you one thing, and this is how you do it. The next chef, you do those things that last chef told you, he might look at you and say, no, this is how we do it. And I don't know, there's just a lot of nuances there, so I get really excited. So anyways, forgive me.
I look at the chef industry as like modern day pirates. I really do. I see it as one of the most challenging industries because it's not huge margins, first of all. And then the hours, and they're on their feet, and the lifestyle is just, it's not healthy. I mean, for really high end and kind of restaurant based businesses, I mean, they're working long hours, a lot of times very late hours. A lot of them don't eat until 4 a.m, 2 or 4 a.m. And then they're going to bed and they're sleeping all day. It's like everything that anyone that's a biohacker or anyone in the health space would be like, oh my God, that's the worst way to live. And what I think is so funny, or not, just kind of interesting, is that anyone that understands health knows that, okay, we crave salt when our adrenals are shot. And when you are constantly in fight or flight mode, your adrenals are typically shot. Well, the chef industry or the culinary industry is a constant fight or flight industry. Like it's like you're constantly in overdrive. And I guarantee that community, from chefs all the way down to the line cooks, or even down to the dishwashers, their adrenals are shot. But the chefs are the one that are salting your food. So and they have to taste it to know how much to salt it, right? So it's like, how do they not oversalt or undersalt when their adrenals are shot? Like, I just find that really fascinating that they're basing their taste off of very, I don't know, for lack of a better word, off taste buds.
Mm-hmm.
And yet most of them do fine. Like, it's not too salty, it's not too undersalt. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting to me. But just to answer your question, Liz, like, I mean, it's kind of wild that I'm a chef, to be honest with you. I mean, I grew up in a household where the smoke detector went off, we knew dinner was ready. Like, there is, like, I grew up in the 70s, but yet it was like 50 style food. It was like frozen vegetable, baked potato, and then a slab of meat or some kind. And then when I was younger, for that first decade, like it was shake and bake everything. It was shake and
Oh, yeah.
bake chicken, shake and bake pork chops. And anyone that doesn't know, basically shake and bake was like this seasoning kind of breaded seasoning mix that you would buy, and it had a little bag, and then you would stick the meat you were doing with the seasonings, and you shake it and coat it. And I guarantee it was not healthy at all. I don't even know what was in it at this point. I'm not even sure if it's sold in the stores anymore, but I don't even look for it because I just know it's like not good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I grew up. And I loved cooking though. It was just one of those things I always gravitated towards. I would read cookbooks on the side for fun. When I would go to a waiting room and I saw a magazine that was culinary based, I would read that over like People magazine. Like I was just always curious, but I didn't see it as a job. I thought, I don't know why, but I was like 11-year-old in 6th grade, and I was like, well, I don't want to be a chef because they have to work late, and I'm a family man. I'm like, it literally makes no sense, but for whatever reason, I didn't see it as a career path until 9/11. 9/11 happened, which for all intents and purposes is our Pearl Harbor for our generation and the generations around it. It's like, and it just it made me reevaluate my life. And I was like, I want to only be doing that which has heart, and I want to be on mission. And so then it was like, well, what's my mission? Like, why am I here? And I was substitute teaching in the LA Unified, and I was also in the entertainment business. And I did like creativity in the entertainment business, but I also didn't feel like it was my last stop. I saw it as just a stepping stone. And I was like, why am I waiting? Like, why am I doing this when I really want to be helping people with their health, like, and helping myself with my health as well? And that's when I just decided I'm going to go to culinary school, and I found one in New York. I knew, and this is key, I think, Joey, for our conversation, which is I knew I did not want to be a restaurant chef. Like right away, I knew that's not the lifestyle, because I was already far enough into my interest in health that I wanted my culinary interests or passion to also be in line with my health interests. And working in a late night kitchen, as we already discussed, is not health. There's nothing healthy about it. And so I knew I didn't want to do that. So then I was like, well, where is there a place for me in this industry? And I just kind of instinctively was like, well, private chefing, because you're working one-on-one with a person or a family, and you can really help them, and you can be kind of all in, and you get to maybe control the hours. I mean, I didn't understand the business then, but so that's why I found a school that was known for people in households calling to find chefs. And the school doesn't exist anymore, but it was called the Natural Gourmet Institute. And and
that was in New York. That was in New York.
Yep, in New York.
Okay.
And it was a short program. It was only 4 months, but it was intensive, like like long hours every day. And you kind of got the basics, but in no way did you get the depth that you would get from a year program at like ICA or or ICE or whatever, anything like that. But it gave me the skills I needed to go down this path. And what's so beautiful, I think, for anyone that kind of gets on mission, and I'm just assuming that's why this happened, but when I went down the path of becoming a chef, I'm always a hard worker, but I went from putting out 100% to getting back 200% when I went down the chef route. When I was in the entertainment business, I was putting out 100% and getting back 20%. But it was like I became a manifester. I could think, I want to cook for a band. And 2 weeks later, I'd get a call. Hey, they're looking for a vegan, vegetarian chef for the Vans Warped Tour. It's a 50-day city tour in 60 days, travels all of North America, 4 stops in Canada. Do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah. Then I was like, I want to cook for celebrities. Hey, I got a client who's looking for somebody. They won't say who they are just yet, but they want to sample your food. Can you bring a sample to this address in Beverly Hills? Do that. There's like these people in like black ties, look like CIA at the, guard gate. And I'm like, who is this? And I just give them the food and then I leave. And then I get a call later and I learn it's Tom Cruise. You know
Oh
what I mean?
my
It's like,
gosh.
you just never know. And I just slowly started to build this, amazing roster of clients and really got to learn that trade of private chefing, but I still wasn't satisfied. Like I still was like, this is great, but I just feel like I'm here to help more people. Like in many ways, it was that 1% versus the 99%. Like I was helping the 1%, but really want to help the 99% because they're the ones that need the help even more so. And so I left. I left working for all these Tom Cruise. I had a handful of clients at the time, and I left them and I started a meal delivery service in LA because I thought, well, I can reach more people this way. I can make the food more affordable. But if anyone's ever read any business books, so there's this concept of you can be a great baker, but you may not know how to run a bake shop. And that was me. Like I could cook, but I did not know how to run a business. So that meal delivery service was my crash course. And holy moly, was that tough. Like I had panic attacks because I had some employees and I was like, I had to work 4 other jobs because I didn't have any funding. I was self-funding. I mean, it was crazy, but we grew like people were responding and we were helping people. And it was like, okay, I'm on mission, but I still was swallowed by the business. And so I eventually, after doing that for 8 years, I had to leave LA to get out from that business. I sold it, but it didn't go very successful. That whole process, but it was more important for me to get out because I was losing my health, which is ironic. And this is so true with anyone in the health field. I've talked to so many people about this, is how you can go down the path of wanting to help people. You can be putting out great information, but the one person in that scenario who's not getting helped is you, because you start losing you stop taking care of yourself because you're so overwhelmed with taking care of others.
Wow.
And that was totally my story.
Did you feel like what you learned in that crash course, that first business, helped you when you went on to open up Pluck?
Absolutely. So a couple of big things happened. So when that business sold / ended for me, it still actually runs, like someone else has it, and it's still a thriving business, I guess. But I don't think they follow my paradigm of health, what I had set. I think they're doing their own. But kind of actually to your point, Joey, that how the chefs kind of view their different Caesar salads, you know what I mean? That's totally the case. Is I delivered a business that was like very healthy, and now they're doing it their healthy way. It's so funny.
Exactly.
But so I learned a couple key things. So one was that your business plan should not be separate from your health plan. So when I was formulating Pluck, I was like, I'm going to build my schedule so that I am always doing, I want to say 3 things, but it might be 4. So let's say 3 things. One is that I'm exercising, I'm eating home cooked meals, and I still have time to be a father. So those were the 3 non-negotiables as I was building my business. The other key thing that I think a lot of people don't think about is that when we talk about a work schedule or work week, we're basing it off of our society here in the US. But if you go around the world, every work week is different in different countries. Like France's work week completely shorter than ours. Lunch times completely longer in other nations and other cities than ours. Like so you start to kind of put on those worldly glasses, you start to realize, oh, there's no one way of running a business, and 2, it's all on, like, it's all made up. It's all make believe. It's all just people saying, well, I think this is what the work week should be, and I think this is how we should run a business, and I think this is what matters, but it's all made up. And so you're like, oh, so wait, I can make this up too? And that's really what I did. Was I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that the business is in alignment with the lifestyle I want. And if I have those 3 non-negotiables, then I'm going to make sure, okay, it's an online business. so that it can be open 24 hours, 24/7.
Mhm.
But I'm going to make sure that it's a product, so it's kind of like you either buy it or you don't. So it's not something you could say, oh, can I have it without the onions? It's like, nope, because it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So you make it a product that can't be kind of like that doesn't have to be abided by people's personalities, but it's just more of like, if the product resonates, you get it. And then you set clear communication of like, this is when customer service is open and we will get back to you within 24 hours. And you just try to be as clearly communicative as you can, but it doesn't mean I have to be always on. It just means I have to communicate when I'm on.
Yeah, that's good. What was your founding idea? What was the spark that led to Pluck? Because if you haven't tried Pluck before, it's this organ-based seasoning. You sprinkle it, I would say, on basically anything.
Yeah.
Popcorn, eggs, like dinner. Literally, it's got at least the original flavor. I don't know about newer flavors, but has this like kind of smoky, like umami to it. I don't know. There's just something so savory about it. It just adds that elevated level of seasoning. But the beauty is like it's actually beneficial seasoning. Like there's organs inside of it. Great way to sneak organs inside your kids. What in the world led you to be like, hey, let's make this seasoning with organs inside?
Yeah, I'm still kind of blown away that I created a new food that has natural ingredients in it, and that's not laboratory made. Like in today's day and age, it just feels like you rarely hear that. It's usually some Franken food or something. I think it's a combination of that, being a father and wanting to get the most nutrient dense foods into my kids as possible, and recognizing that those are organ meats, but that there are three main hurdles. That people think they're gross, they don't know how to cook them, or they don't know how to source them. So that was one piece. The other piece is that as a chef, I've always been interested in trying to help people with their health. And I always look at food, because I was a very picky eater growing up. So I look at food not from like the standpoint of this kind of what I call the illusion of health, because what some people will be able is like, well, here it's a grilled chicken breast, and that's what makes it healthy. It's like, I don't look at like that's literally not at all how I look at it. I look at it as like, well, how is that animal fed? How is it processed? How is it cooked? Like, I'm all about the how versus what. But where the what comes in is, well, you got to meet people where they are, because for something to truly be sustainable, so sustainable health is what I'm really interested in. I'm not just interested in like getting you to try a healthy protein bar like once, like that. Who cares? Like, being in this business as long as I have, I've seen trends come and go, and I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't work. And what I find that truly moves the needle is the things that we can do a little bit each day that don't require new habits, and that meet two very important criteria around food: that they have to be easy to assimilate into your day, and they have to be delicious, and it has to hit both. If it doesn't hit both, it's not going to be sustainable, and it's not going to become lifestyle. And so that's like, for me, it's like I just want to meet people where they are, and I want to say, okay, so when you're having an emotionally hard day, what kind of, like, we're here, let's do it with you. I'll pretend I'm going to be your private chef. Okay. So one of the things I would do is I would first ask you, okay, like, so when you have a hard day, or I would say that, or I would even say, like, when you were younger, what kind of textures did you gravitate towards as a child, or when you have a hard day? How would you answer that?
Crunchy and salty.
Okay.
For you or for me?
For me.
Oh, I was going to say, I just got fresh off of car shopping, so I feel like I'm already, like, I'm in the hard day. I hate it. It's the worst experience of my life. I want like brothy soup. Like, I want like a ramen, I want like
so sort of
super
umami,
savory,
salty, but warming, right?
Yes.
But when you had, like, when you were a little kid, did you like creamy? Like, what was the food that you would kind of like gravitate towards? Was it mashed potatoes or something salty, fluffy, noodly?
Salty, noodly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yours again, Joey, was what? Crispy?
I mean,
Salty?
from
Crunchy,
like
salty?
The easiest one to look at for me would be like junk food would be potato chips, right?
Potato
Crunchy,
chips, yeah.
salty. That would be the number one if I was really stressed and off of a hard shift or whatever, right? It was like, dude, I could just put down a whole bag of Flamin' Hot Cheetos and be good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So right there. So now we're looking at texture, and then we're looking at and also what is the actual food that you're getting that sensation from. So for you it might be chips. For you it's some kind of ramen or noodle thing. So right away then I would be like, okay, well let's start there. And let's, instead of using a potato chip, let's make it a sweet potato or a root vegetable chip. And this is back in the day, obviously. And it's like, or I'd be like, okay, if it's a corn chip, and corn is not always the best thing for people. A lot of it's genetically modified. Some people are very sensitive to it. We're getting way too much corn in our diet. So it's like, I'd be like, okay, how about we make it with cassava flour, or like a coconut wrap and have it be like a coconut, so I would look at like, how can I still get you that crunchy flavor? And then I might even like make the foods that I'm trying to encourage you to eat, I would make them so that they have that texture. So I might take shallots and I might crisp them up and make sure that when you have food that you're getting that kind of crunchy, salty little taste going on. And for you, Liz, I might make more broths, and make really clean broths and make sure that you're kind of getting very warming foods, things like that. And so I would start to influence your diet and your palate, but using so similar textures, similar flavors, but totally healthier foods. And that was my in. And then and that's actually a big trick on how you can get a picky eating child to start eating more adventurously. Is so when you think about the palate, it's really broken up into 5 factors. There's actually a 6, but we'll just focus on the 5. I'll mention the 6, but it's the ones we grew up learning, salty, sweet, bitter, sour. And then the 5th is umami, which Liz mentioned earlier. The 6th one is that kind of, they think it's its own flavor, and it's basically rancid. Like when food is bad, it has a different flavor. And it's like it stands out. And so they think that's actually a taste as well. But the 4 we grew up with are the main focus, which is you then think about, okay, well, what is that child's, like I look at the flavors as music notes, right? So it's like, so what are those music notes of that child's diet? Well, if it's most likely, if they're in America, it's salty sweet.
Yeah.
Pretty guaranteed that the majority of their foods are salty sweet. So that means their palate is very conditioned towards salty sweet. So the way that you would sort of start to get them out of that is you would treat it no differently than you would if you had a pet, like a dog, and you were trying to get that dog to eat a new food. You don't go all in on the new food because they'll get diarrhea, they'll have digestive issues. So you go 95% of the old food and 5% of the new, and you keep doing that until the new food is the 95 and the old food is 5. And you would do that with flavor. So you would, let's say I don't know, what's a like, so let's just say it's a dino chicken nugget, which your kids eat. I'm trying to think of like what most picky eating kids eat. So if that's what they're eating and they're dipping it in a sauce, I would put a little bit of sauerkraut juice, because that's sour, into that sauce, just a little bit, just a little drop. And you would start to incorporate that sour into what's sweet and salty. And you might even, and then if you were using that chicken nugget and you were like putting salt on it or something like that, I would actually then put a little Pluck on it, because Pluck is umami, as you mentioned earlier. So that's the 5th taste. So now you're just sort of slowly incorporating these other flavors. And it's fascinating, because what does really happen is people's palates start opening up, and then they start being open to new foods. And we get that feedback all the time. So whereas we look at these things as just behavioral, a lot of times it's more of mechanical, it's physical. And we can really like get out of the bad habit by really focusing on the palate. But we just have to ease into it. We just can't rush it.
Yeah, I love that. I love catching parents before they've even gotten into the rut of introducing those hyperpalatable foods. I love when I hear there's a mom who maybe has a 4-month-old who's like, okay, when I start solids in a couple months, what's the best resources? And I'm like, yes, the sooner we can start your kids on this expanded palate diet that does include things like liver, like egg yolk, like butter, and then you're more sour, your brines from your ferments, things like that, all can be eaten under one. Then I find that those kids just really, really thrive. And we've seen that in our own children. We have one baby who started off just like liver and egg yolk, and just she thrives to this day. And then we have others who we were later on in our real food journey. We had to do some backtracking. So I'm with those parents in that. And you're right, it is these little tweaks, and it takes time. And I think the thing that parents need to hear the most is like, it's so worth it to make that effort, because
Absolutely.
you have 3 or 4 meal times that are just dang frustrating, and you're like, screw it. But I'm telling you, if you power through that, it is so worth it in the end. Even if it takes a year, those efforts, I think they just multiply as the kids get older and older and better understand food and their own palate, and then they enter into the space where they're making their own food choices. And that's really where you want to equip them to make the right thing.
Absolutely. Well, and as you probably know, you can even start when, just like you are, or you're pregnant right
When
now.
you're pregnant, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
the palate is actually starts getting shaped as right now while they're in utero. Back, I just love though talking about picky eating, because as I mentioned, I was a picky eater, and if I look back at it honestly, a lot of picky eating is emotional based. Like it was me trying to control what was going into my mouth, because the rest of my life I couldn't control. So it was a control thing, and that's usually where it starts. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Okay, so something that is very human nature and that people need to know, because you were talking about like you just got to stay the course. Well, here's the thing. Every human being, like that basically the more we do something, the more we will eventually like it.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. And you could talk to anyone that's ever been incarcerated, for example. They go in and they say the food was disgusting, but they leave and they miss the food. So there is something about you just keep giving it to your kid, and you keep introducing the flavor, and you keep slowly, if you're like, I know some people get so persnickety about like, oh, I don't want to hide things in my kid's food. It's like, what are you talking about? You hide things all the time. Did you tell them every seasoning that you put in your kid's food? Hey, honey, today we have salt, paprika, garlic powdered, cumin, chicken. You don't say that. You just don't. We're serving chicken and rice. Whatever it is. Like, you don't break everything down. So it's like, why do you think you have to do that with all these healthier things? And I just tell people, like, even with Pluck, I'm like, just put it in. They don't need to know it's organ meats. But the more you just consistently give it to them, their palate will expand, and they will actually start to like organ meats. They'll want them. So then the next time you try to serve a pate, they'll try it and they'll be like, oh, that's actually really good. It's just the frequency. You got to keep doing it.
That's so interesting. I think about that with, is it similar, or do you know with spicy food?
Absolutely. Yes. You have to, if you start your child young and you do a little bit, they will eventually you can increase it over time, and then they'll eventually be able to handle spicy food. But absolutely.
I've seen that. We've noticed that in our family. We like, it's also like, it almost sounds like brainwashing. But like our kids, I want it to be as appropriate as I can here when I say this, but like our kids will say things like, that's spicy. And I'll respond to that and be like, good. We like spicy food as Hazel Myers. Like that's who we are. We like that. And then they'll kind of like pause for a second. And like, well, my cousin said it was spicy, so their mom took it away and like put milk. Like
it was an out. It can be easily used as like an out. And we're just like, no, that's an entire realm of the culinary experience
that we want you to have access to. And so we don't give our kids that out. We don't let them tell us it's a little bit spicy.
Giving them a jalapeno.
Yeah, we're not like lighting them up.
Medium salsa, and they're going to be okay with it. And if they want a dollop of sour cream, they can have it. But I have some family members who are like, black pepper is too much for me. And I'm like, you know what? your culinary scope is so small. I feel bad. We need to expand it. I want my kids to have an expanded scope as well.
But I think you
Totally.
do that same conditioning though of like, I don't like eggs. It's like, yeah, no, we like eggs. And then we just like walk away. I'm not gonna sit there and have a
Sounds a
huge
little
conversation.
gaslighty though.
It's like, no, we like eggs. And like, and then, but I think what Chef James is saying here is kind of what it's like, you keep introducing it, you keep normalizing it, and it's really for their benefit. And not to like, once they turn 18, I'm not like gonna show up their doorstep with eggs, like, all right, time for eggs. It's like, there's some helping them have that palate so that they can explore new foods. And I think it's a good thing.
I think
Now,
it's not fun to be picky too. It's boring, you know?
no. Yeah, but I do believe there are some caveats, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Well, okay, so one is you're talking about kind of that mindset as well, or that reinforcement. And so one offer I would say is like when they say this is spicy, you could say, yeah, it is flavorful, isn't it? You like
Mhm.
just change the word,
That's good.
right? So change the imprint, because really
Yes.
what's happening when we repeat words or we repeat things that other people have experienced, we're starting to create story, and we are trying to build a case around that story. We're trying to justify whatever it is we feel or whatever it is we want based on that story. And we all do it. There's just constant stories like, I'm not good at this, or I'm shy. It's like, you are? Really? Like maybe maybe it's not that you're not good at this. Maybe you're just getting better at it. You know,
Mhm.
you're just new at it, and you're getting better every day. You know what I mean? So we are, as parents, I believe we constantly have to like be aware that we are mirrors for our
Mm.
kids, and we are either their best friend or their best enemy in terms of what we mirror back. And what we mirror back is going to shape, how they see themselves. And so constantly changing language that doesn't agree, like that you think is judgy or limiting, is, I think, really smart. But the other thing is, and this is the caveat around kind of picky eating, I would say, is that I also believe that kids are more in tune with what their bodies need
Mhm.
than we adults are, because we're very heady and they're not. They're just following texture, they're following what feels good in their body. And so as parents, I do believe sometimes we just want to listen. It's not that the kid is always right. I'm not that type of parent at all. I believe that we have to lay boundaries, and that kids flourish in boundaries, and that we've got to have a strong baseline as parents, strong core parent, mother, father, whoever the parents are, come first, then the kids, that kind of thing, like create that stability. Um, but I also believe that if a kid is consistently saying like, I just don't like this, like and you've tried it in different ways, you've tried preparing it different ways. It's raw, here it's seasoned, here it's crispy. If you tried all these different textures, they just still don't like it. It may be because they know that they have a sensitivity to it, or something is off.
Mm.
Mhm.
So I do think that it's kind of finding that balance. And you don't obviously know until you test them. But like, so here's an interesting thing regarding me. I've never liked raw tomatoes, ever,
Mm.
never, ever, ever, right? And so in many ways you could say, well, that's me being a picky eater. But then later on I learned, oh, wait a second, I'm very fair skinned. I can get sunburned very easily. And what do you get when you have a cooked tomato? Well, you get, I think it's called lipine or something.
Mhm.
I'm skipping on the name right now, but when it's cooked, the tomato's cooked, it changes the chemistry of the tomato, and it actually can support your skin from getting sunburned. It actually supports it. So isn't that interesting that I don't gravitate towards raw tomatoes, but I do like cooked tomatoes,
Mm.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
right? So if I was forced to eat raw tomatoes, is that necessarily because I'm picky, or just because I instinctively know what my body needs?
Mhm. Yeah, in our case, a lot of the time it's, I don't like that. And it's like, well, have you tried it? No. And so
Right.
it's in those moments where you're like, all right, and then we do kind of move into this. Let's try it a couple different ways. Let's
Yep.
hard boil the egg. Let's hide the egg in this. Let's cook it in that. And then I think also, yeah, leaving room for maybe even giving them more language of like, okay, if you don't like it, what is it? Is it the flavor? Is it the texture? Is it how you feel after? Is it the smell of it while it's being prepared? Like, what element of it doesn't sit right with you and why? Obviously, if you have a 2-year-old, those conversations are going to look different. But 8-year-olds plus, you can have that conversation and
Totally.
totally let them lead you in that. without being like, oh, I give in, I have to be limiting them to these 5 foods, because that is also so hard. So there's no easy way to feed kids. It's all hard.
Oh yeah.
And
Totally. And,
yeah,
and of course, when you had a hard day, or you're so busy as a parent and running your own business and all that stuff, it's like we we just need to do things that are easy. We don't want to do more hard things. And if you're cooking multiple meals, or if you're cooking things and your kids aren't eating, it feels hard. It's just
yeah,
you're adding stress to your day that you don't want as a parent. And I get it. I think it is I think it's really interesting, and I'm really curious how this plays out for you guys. I know your kids are a little younger, but like I have a 12-year-old, and what I find is that we can kind of control what they get fed in our house, but the reality is once they leave, they're going to eat whatever they want.
hmm
And so kind of like that, I know that's it's a challenging position, I think, for every parent that cares about their kids' health, and specifically cares about it from a food-based perspective. Because of course you can come at health in so many different angles, right? But those of us that really connect what we eat to our health, what our kids eat is very important. And I see that I really don't have any control. Like once my kid leaves my house, because my kid is in public school, it's like she's gonna do what she's gonna do. So then it becomes like, well, what how can I help prepare her? How can I support her? And I'm curious how you guys view this, and I know you homeschool and all that, but still there's times where you don't have control, right?
yeah,
So I'm curious how you guys deal with it, but I'll just share with how I'm kind of dealing with it. Is I'm more just kind of seen as like, well, I think my job is you have a home base, and I make sure that the home food is sacred. Like, this is the food we eat at home. And then you let the kid eat what they're going to eat, but then reflect back to them. So how does that make your body feel? How do you feel? Like, hey, do you notice your skin is kind of breaking out more than it used to? Like, do you think that's tied to what you're eating? Or, like, so I just try to mirror back to her, not to make shame her, not to make her feel, sensitive to the way she looks, but more just like trying to help her connect the dots of like, I wonder if how I'm feeling in my body is connecting to what I'm eating.
yeah.
I
I
feel like that's all I have the power to do.
Yeah. And that's great. I do the same thing. I feel strongly about this because I had a terrible relationship with food growing up. And so having 3 daughters, I'm like, how can I equip them to have a better relationship? We do have younger kids, but we also have a 13-year-old. So she is
Oh,
in that space where she can definitely self-select. And it's a conversation. We just recently started back at our co-op, and the snack table is like as if it's from the 1990s. I mean, it's like Swiss rolls and
uh,
Airheads and just everything. And you know what? My kids know where I stand, but I'm with them when I pick them up, and I watched my 8-year-old buy 3 snacks off that snack table this Wednesday. And she sat out there. I was not going to linger over her and put shame on her. I just said, oh, enjoy your snacks. You love co-op days. That's a special treat, huh? And she looked at me. She goes, this is so sweet. I'm like, yeah, it is so sweet. Keep telling me more food details that don't necessarily have like a value to them, right? Like, talk to me about the food. You know how we eat at home. We don't ever keep these things in our pantry. But I'm not going to take this opportunity to try to control or use my ego as a parent as an excuse to try to be like, oh my gosh, what if someone sees my kid and they're like, well, that's Liz from Homegrown. Like, I don't care, because we have as you said, such a solid foundation at home. And honestly, we don't deprive sweets at home at all. We'll make a batch of cookies once a week. We might do like scones or something. And I think where it gets tricky is when you're so rigid in the home and you're so scared of every external food source. It works when they're young. You can control when they're young, but when they get past 6 or 7, it's really hard to control their food choices out of the home 100%. And I don't think that's my goal. And the other thing we come up against is like, well, if you guys eat so well, don't you think that's setting up an unrealistic expectation? And what if your kids just rebel when they're older? And I'm like,
right.
me setting a value and a precedent for my kids when they're young in any realm of parenting is never ever sabotaged by the fact that I know they're going to make their own choices. But what better way than to buffer them in a safe environment where they can reach out and grab the Swiss roll and then later tell me like, man, I don't feel that great. Or we do have conversations with our 13-year-old who's very skincare obsessed. And she's like, yeah, the weeks I eat more sugar, like I'm just not sure if that's good for my skin. And I'm like, yeah, you should connect those dots because acne is not a normal teenage expression. Not every teenager has to have acne. Like it's so tied to what you eat. And so just letting them have those conversations and then keeping a balance in the home. What do you have to add?
It's a great question. And it's so much more, I think, that same question, I believe, applies to everything we do in parenting. But I'm going to answer it just for the food because I think that's what we're talking about today. And we have a term that we've kind of coined over here, and we call it demystifying, right? Because if you set up this like mystical, like other food, now you're setting your kids up for like exactly that, right? This very sheltered, comfy home where everything is perfect. And then when they go out in the world, they're not really prepared to deal with what's out there. Okay. I would rather demystify a lot of those things alongside my kids and educate them around what's most beneficial to them and why these foods that they want so bad maybe aren't so great for them. And I think you could make the same case with alcohol, with raunchy television. It could be all kinds of things that your kids are going to somewhat, in some way, shape, or form, run into in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And we're walking this line of teach our kids responsibility and autonomy and self-reliance and also physical health, right? And so we can be on one end of the extreme where we're just working on nothing but physical health and that's it. And so then when they leave home, they feel great. And they're like, my parents never let me have any of this stuff. I'm going straight to Kroger and buying Mountain Dew, Doritos, Swiss cake roll, whatever, right? Or when they're at the snack table at co-op, right? We can talk about those things together with them. I would rather have the experience with them when they're drinking alcohol than we don't drink alcohol in our house. You're not going to have any, and we think it's terrible for you. And then they go to college, and what are they going to do? Okay. Yeah. They're probably going to go drink some alcohol.
Yeah.
And I would rather my kid goes to a party and they're like, oh yeah, I've had this before with my dad. And it's not really that exciting for me. And I know if I drink 5 beers, I'm probably going to be in some trouble physically. So I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'll have one. And I'm going to call my dad and be like, hey dad, I had a beer at this party. I'm like, cool, that's fine. How was it? You need to get picked up. You need to ride.
And we're not going to encourage underage drinking if that's the impression you're giving. But
not giving that impression. I'm just saying that I would rather be in a place where my kids, if they were to choose something like drinking alcohol, eating Doritos, buying junk food, is more of a demystified thing rather than this.
Or it's not a dirty little secret, like they're not hiding it from you.
Exactly.
I think there's also other elements to it too. It's not just the food you put in, it's your hydration, it's your movement, and you can teach your kids to pull different levers. If you want to have that snacky food, can you also lean into maybe moving your body a little extra, drinking a little bit more water to kind of flush out? Like there's other conversations you can bring in so that it's not all just what food am I eating?
Totally.
Need to be obsessive.
Totally.
I had a conversation with my 12-year-old. Well, first of all, I have to make this comment. Why? So you have a 13-year-old, I have a 12-year-old. What is going on with that generation? They're all so skin obsessed.
Oh my gosh.
Like I don't understand. Skincare obsessed. It's like the amount of skincare stuff she's constantly trying to order or finagle from us. It's like I've never seen anything like it. It's like a phenomena and I don't understand it. I'm sure it has something to do with TikTok or social media or something, but I don't understand it.
I don't know. I mean, our 13-year-old doesn't have a phone, doesn't have TikTok, no access to social media, minus Pinterest on her computer, which you can still share TikTok videos. So, I mean, you can kind of get in there. I think the skincare obsession is just the industry really honing in on this age group because I think it's there. The market is there in prime and they're buying it and they're obsessed.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of the influencers too, because it really is a big part of the TikTok generation, whatever you want to call that, right? It's this get ready with me.
Yes.
It's these girls that are 13, 14, 15 that want to be influencers, right? And what can they actually what kind of content can they actually create? Well, they can create content of them at their house.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do I have that maybe you want, right? And man, these kids are eating it up.
Yeah, it's wild. But my two things happened recently that I think are really profound. So one, I had a conversation with my 12-year-old, and it was just simply a conversation. She kind of started it, but it was like just talking about short-term and long-term decisions,
Hmm.
and how like we're constantly kind of doing one or the other. And so and I was kind of explaining to her, I'm like, well, for me, not eating that cookie. Oh, I know what it was. I think she went to some bakery with her grandma and she brought home these cookies. And I explained to her, I said, I love that you had a good time with your grandma. I love that you got a treat. I said, but can you please not bring those home in the future? Like, don't buy more than what you're going to eat.
Mm.
And she said, why? I said, well, because I'm really trying to only make long-term decisions right now. Like when I'm eating food, I want them to be for long-term outcome, meaning that I'm trying to take care of my health. I'm trying to make sure I'm here and thriving as I get older, and as she gets older, that I can be in their lives. And I said, so for me to do that, I know that when there's junk in the house, I don't have an off switch. So I've learned in my, I'm 50. So I was like, in my 50 years, I was like, I've learned that doesn't work for me. I just don't have an off. If it's there, I will make some excuse to eat it. So I can either pretend that that's not the case, or I can just learn from it and be like, okay, I'm not going to bring it in the house. And so I just said, if you don't mind, I would love your support with that. And then we started talking about like short-term decisions versus long-term. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with when you're at camp and like they're serving candy and you're like, I just want this. I want this immediate gratification of this candy. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you having your fun in that moment. I said, just be aware though, if every day you're making those kind of decisions, and make sure that you're including those long, like thinking of the long view, like thinking of like, how is this going to affect me in the long term? Like if you keep eating, like one thing, particularly I think I've learned this in my age, is like, I know what a cookie tastes like. Right. So when someone pushes a cookie on me, I'm like, and they're like, it's so good. And you're like, okay, but I'm sure it's not better than the 10,000 cookies I've had in my lifetime. Like, you know what I mean? I know it's a basic flour, butter, sugar kind of egg scenario. Like you're not going to revolutionize, sweets for me. So I can either pretend and invest in this kind of short term, like immediate gratification of like, oh, I got to try this. She's saying it's so good. Or I can be like, well, but I know long term of how it makes my body feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just having that kind of talk around that. But what was interesting is like now I can say to her, oh, is that a short term decision or a long term one?
That's good.
And
That's
so we
really
have a
good.
language, and it's not like there's no shaming. Like she was like, oh, that was a short term. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And but it's just making her aware. And this is the other profound thing that just happened with my 12-year-old and my wife. This is from my wife. That's really got me thinking. And I'm like, oh man, I have to make sure that I'm doing this more. And I believe that this connects to food too. But my daughter was just upstairs crying. And there wasn't necessarily something that happened that we did something against her and she was mad. She was just crying. School just started. It's like day 3. And she was just letting out her emotions. Now, we didn't know that in the moment. My inclination was to go up and like, well, did something just happen between her and her mom? Should I go up and ask her what's wrong? And that's my inclination. But what happened is my wife went back up in the room because she had just said goodnight. And then my daughter started crying. And then she went back up. But instead of saying, hey, why are you crying? She just sat next to her and held her. Didn't say anything. And my daughter at first tried to push her away. She said, honey, I'm just going to hold you. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm just going to hold you. And then she cried more, and she just let her hold her. And it was a real kind of lesson, or at least how I heard that. I was like, oh yeah, I think this age just needs our presence. Like we should
Mm-hmm.
stop talking so much. You know what I mean? Like making something that it's like sometimes I think try to make something out of everything. And it's just like sometimes they just need us to be present and not talking. Like just let them express whatever they're going through and for us to not comment on it and you know
Mm-hmm.
and try to make something about it that's ours. Like let them have it. Let them be in the state they're in and that's it. Like let that be enough.
Yeah, that's good. I think too, there's an element of like you're safe to have emotions with me. I'm not scared by them.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's big. And I also think like you could translate that with food. Like when my daughter is sitting there eating her like Swiss roll outside of co-op at the playground and I'm looking at her, I am not like, come on now, finish that up. Like only eat half. You're safe with me. You know my food choices. I'm not going to eat that. But I love you. I hope you had an awesome day at co-op. Thank God this is only one day a week, right? Thank God this is only the 1% of the week. And I know that the rest of the day, we're in the rest of the weeks, days of the week, we are fueling your body well. So it's such a, you never have all the answers, obviously, as parents. And it's such a day by day. We just keep trying to find what works with them. And
as soon as you figure it out, your kid gets a year older and it all changes.
It changes, yeah. But you brought up something earlier too that I think probably the majority of influencer homesteaders like yourself, anyone that's in the health field that's, trying to make a name for themselves, like there is that other element of like, and you beautifully mentioned it, like you were like, yeah, I try not to let the perspective of that we're in public and that people may know who I am influence how I treat my kids around that food.
mm-hmm.
Because that, I imagine that's really hard sometimes for the majority of people out there that are in the homesteader or health field. It's like, it's not only like your role as a parent, but that you're kind of aware of, but you're also very conscious of like, what is my role in society?
Mm-hmm. I think dropping your ego, even if you have no eyes on you, is hard as a
Oh,
parent.
super hard. Yes.
What is fun for people? Because like I'm going to a campfire tonight with some buddies. We're going to talk about upcoming hunting season and just have a campfire and be together. We're actually going to walk the woods and find a couple spots for this property that I'm going to be hunting this year. And they're going to help me. I'm super excited about it. But one of the first texts that comes over is to the group is like, well, what's Joey gonna be drinking and eating? And I was just like, it's just kind of how it goes, that's every group I'm in, all right, let's get it out of the way. And I was like, and I said, hey, don't worry about it. I'll bring my own stuff if you don't want to. And then he laughed. He's like, I got you on some sparkling water, Joe. No worries. It's just that exact same thing. And again, not even parenting, but sometimes it's even your peers, right? It's the funny joke of how often I get the message of like, hey, we'll meet up at the McDonald's. Is that cool with you, Joe? We'll meet up at the McDonald's, And it's just you just gotta roll with it and not become the weirdo that makes everybody feel uncomfortable all the time.
Oh, Joey, so my wife's a functional nutritionist, and me being a chef, we still live in LA, and that's when my first daughter was born. And we never when we came together, we never got invited to people's houses ever. And it was like it had nothing. We weren't judgmental. We were like grateful if someone invited us, but no one invited because they saw it as too much pressure.
Oh yeah.
They're like, I can't cook for you guys. But so we used to say, well, okay, well, how about you bring the food, but we'll cook it or something like
That's
or whatever.
so
We'll
fun.
do like a potluck and we'll tell you what to bring, that kind of thing. But yeah, we never got invited over to people's houses.
That's funny. The chef thing is another thing that comes up, and I'm curious if you've ever experienced this. And so there's this aura around chefs where like chefs are super, super like picky eaters. And in my experience, that's not true. In my experience, chefs are lucky to eat it all. And so if they have food, it's like when I was working in kitchens, I mean, dude, I would roll through White Castle and be happy. Like it was just like, I'm hungry. And
but how old were you then?
I was like 17, 18, 19,
yeah,
20.
that's probably why.
And but I would like when Elizabeth and I started dating, I'll never forget. She, her parents would have me over, and it was always like, everyone's waiting for Joey to take his first bite of food. It's like really quiet. And I'll take a bite and I'll be like, this is great. Like, I hope you don't think that I roll in places and, I'm not like I sit down like Gordon Ramsay and judge this food. I'm hungry and I'm good to go. I'm probably less picky than all of you.
Mm.
Anyhow, it was
oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever told this story, but the first time I ate at my wife's, her mother had passed at that time, so it was just her father's now passed too, but at the time it was just him. And so the first time I ate at his house, he was really nervous, but pulled out all the stops and made the things that he was known for: his mashed potatoes, his lamb burger, his salad with the vinaigrette, and none of it was stuff that really fit my fancy. And at the time, I didn't think about the fact that people are stressed out when I'm there. I didn't know it. It's just not my, I didn't really, I don't feel like I have a big ego around cooking. So I didn't realize that other people were looking at me like that. And, so I showed up, I ate, I did my meal, and then I commented on the plates. I didn't say anything about the meal. I just said, oh, these are really lovely plates. And he was so insulted. I later learned and Margaret had to, my wife had to have a whole conversation with me. We were like, no, you don't understand. People are stressed when you come over. You need to comment on the food. And if you don't, they think that they did a horrible job. And it was like, oh, but it was totally a learning lesson for me. And and he carried it around forever. And luckily it became a joke, but it was always like, I would literally be walking through their neighborhood and someone said, oh, you're James, the one who didn't like his yada, yada, yada. I was like, yeah,
oh man,
that's me.
That's brutal.
But in general, the thing that I find, so chefs definitely have egos, like no doubt. And I do find that I remember when I worked for that Vans Warped tour I mentioned earlier, the head chef on that tour, when we were traveling around and going to these different cities, we would sometimes we would all be going out to eat, and we'd literally walk through the door of a restaurant, and he would take one look and then turn around and say, I'm not eating here. And I'm like, why? He's like, because it's not going to be good. I'm like, what? Like, you just walked through the door. How would you possibly know that? He's like, I can just tell. And I'm like, huh? And I was a new chef then, so I had no clue. But then skip ahead 5 years, and I was like, I was helping this restaurant group create their menu for this restaurant concept. And the first thing we did was they took me around to all these restaurants in LA and Long Beach, whatnot, all their favorites, because we had to have benchmarks because they wanted to have a roasted potato on their menu. So they had to show me here's their idea of what's a really good roast potato. So we either have to be equal to that or better. And they take me to this restaurant in Long Beach, and we go to walk in, and I immediately can smell in the air that kind of rancid seed oil, fried smell. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to be good. I was him. I was like, oh yeah,
that's so funny.
This is not going to be good. And I was totally right. When the potatoes were served, it was bitter and it tasted horrible from that rancid oil. And I was like, did you guys taste this? And they're like, no. What are you talking about? I'm like, okay. What we need to do is we need to shift your palate. You clearly you can't taste when things are bad. And so I was like, for 2 weeks, I want you to only eat the things that I prepare or that are from scratch. So I don't want you eating anything that's pre-made or from a restaurant. And so we did that. And then they went back to their restaurant on their own, and they said, oh my gosh, you were right. It's disgusting. But they just didn't know.
Wow.
I think about that. Okay, because we went out to eat recently, a whim date night, and I ate the food, and I was like, you know what? I just think the general population's palate is just slowly degrading because our standard of food, and this was a quote nice place. I was like, is this the level that we're at? Is this really worth, what was that meal? $80? It wasn't cheap. And it was a nicer place. And I thought to myself, I wonder if we are sabotaging ourselves because we eat so much home cooked amazing food,
That's
which is
absolutely true.
not a bad thing.
We're rolling into these places, and it's exactly what you're talking about.
I say sabotaging in a bad way, but it's actually a very good thing. I just have such a
Yeah,
higher standard
you're
now.
setting the standard. Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And I would say that the only way to be healthy is to eat from home.
Yeah.
That we have this idea of like, oh, well, look at this new restaurant it's supposed to be really healthy and clean. And it's like there's no restaurant out there that's truly healthy and clean. And if they are, they're crazy expensive, and you would have to be extremely wealthy to be able to eat every meal there.
Or they're closing soon.
Yeah, or they're closing soon because they're not making any money. But basically, every restaurant is a business. Like, I was just talking to someone about this. Like, we have this socialized concept that we think, well, if something is being sold in a restaurant or prepared in a restaurant, if something is sold at the grocery store, that our government has allowed it, and so it must be okay for us to eat and healthy. Like, we just have this. I think we just assume that that's going to be the case, and there's nothing further from the truth. Like, our government is completely co-opted, and then there's lobbyists that are affecting what they, promote, right? So it's constantly about what the corporate interest is. Constantly one of the first things you have to be aware of. And the other thing is like if like in a restaurant, you're trying to make money. So how do you make money? Well, you got to use cheap ingredients because the service and the rent and all that stuff is expensive. They already have very low margins. So the only way to make up some margins is with their ingredients. So if it's a high-end place, they'll usually use higher-end ingredients, you hope, but that's not always a guarantee. But if it's a low-end, if it's a cheaper meal, I guarantee they're not using good ingredients. And that is where they're making the margins. And in a grocery store, well, what is their motivation? It's shelf stability. Like if it can't last on the shelf and they don't have time to sell it, then what happens is the grocery store sends it back to them and charges them for it. So the whole goal of a product in a grocery store is for shelf stability. And what do they do for shelf stability? Well, they put in ingredients that make it so it doesn't separate. Put ingredients so that it preserves it. They use cheap ingredients so they have a same thing as the restaurant, so they have a larger profit margin. Like there's reasons for why they're doing the things they're doing, but I guarantee what's not on at the top of their list is our health.
Mm-hmm.
Guaranteed. So yes, you guys are shifting. You are changing your palate by eating at home, and you're also getting the best of what you're gonna get. Probably the only thing you're gonna get from eating out is my best guess is that you don't have to cook that night. That's really all you're truly getting. You're not necessarily getting better food. You're not necessarily getting anything better than what you could do at home. You're just not having to cook, which is worth it sometimes, right? We can't undermine that.
Knowing to cook, changing gears a little bit here, if it's okay. Elizabeth had brought up something pre-button of record being pressed about her hesitation to sending some of our kids to some more traditionally focused culinary schools. And there's some out there that we know of. NTI, they're good friends of ours. They have some programs that we're excited about that we would enjoy, although not for younger kids. That would be more adult age.
Yeah.
But curious on the thoughts of sending kids to traditional culinary arts programs. I want to kind of open that up for discussion. I have some ideas about that, but the value seen there, is it worth the harm of them learning how to use all these cheap ingredients, seed oils? I mean, me coming out of culinary school, I do remember, canola oil was like my best friend. I mean, we used it in everything. It was everything. It was the perfect oil, right?
Clean the grill, everything. I think what the parent has to ask to the kid or together, you have to figure out is, well, what's the desired outcome? Because if the desired outcome is to be comfortable with cooking, well, parents can do that at home a lot. Like, you got to just include your kid in the cooking all the time, right? From the creating the meal plan to getting the groceries and all of it to cooking it. Sometimes what a cooking class is doing, which is really powerful, is it's just dispelling this concept of like that you can make, like, it's dispelling like that you can actually make stuff from scratch. Like I
Yeah.
remember when I first learned how to make hummus, it blew my mind because I had historically only seen hummus in a store or at a restaurant. And I was just like, what? It's only 4 ingredients and it's that easy? Like I was like, what? Like it's like it locked this kind of thing in my head that, oh, if I can make hummus, I can make anything,
Yeah.
right? And so if that's the desired outcome, then yes, sending them to any culinary program that's doing things, doesn't even matter what the ingredients are, but that's doing something from scratch is worth it because it's showing them how to take a recipe and then create a product if that's the desired outcome. If the desired outcome, so the other thing is sometimes the desired outcome is like, okay, they already love cooking and I just want them to know what it's like to, if this is a career that I want them to know if this is a career they want. Well, you don't send them to culinary school, you send them to work at a restaurant.
Exactly. Yep.
Because what you get from a restaurant, you will not get from a culinary school. Like there's 2 things that if you go, that you can never get from a culinary school, and one is speed and proficiency. Or efficiency, I should say. So speed and efficiency, you will not learn those at culinary school because you have to learn those in an environment that requires you to be fast. Like someone can't just keep saying over you, faster, faster. No, you have to have a real situation where if you're not faster, you're screwed. Like they call that being in the weeds, right? So it's like, and the longer you're in that circumstance, you get faster because you don't have a choice. And then the same thing with learning how to be efficient. You know what I mean? When you're working in a restaurant, you can't have waste the way you would in your own home. Like if you cut that bell pepper top, you better cut all of it, like just the green part. You better leave as much of that bell pepper top on it as you can because we do not waste in this, that kind of thing. Like you really have to learn those skills, but you're going to learn them faster and more efficiently if you're in an environment where it's required.
That's so good. I was gonna almost. I mean, I love that, and I totally agree. And I love how you framed that because the thought was, and bring the thought back up so we can address it again.
So our oldest has always said, I think it would be really fun to open up a bakery, and she's been a very proficient baker for many years. She's learned a lot of techniques. I mean, she can make a choux pastry since she was like 9. Okay, girlfriend like knows how to do a lot. But I'm like, yeah, the idea of opening up a bakery is like very head in the sky. Like there's just so much logistics to being small business owners, and she watches her parents be small business owners. But I thought, what better way than to throw her in the fire and see if she actually likes learning these skills than to do sort of like a career center thing in her maybe like high school years. There's some programs around us where as a homeschooling student, she could go learn and get a culinary arts degree before she even has to like breach college or like the adult years. And I was looking them up and I was just like, oh, this is just, they're so conventional. They're so like, yeah, the average mediocre food quality ingredients, probably not even talking about like the importance of sourcing and just a lot of the stuff that she would have to kind of bring in her own, like backfill her own education of like, well, I learned this as my parents were hunters and home cooks and all these things. But so my question was like, is it even worth it to expose her to that side of the culinary world when we don't even fit in with that side of the culinary world? Or is this something where she should test it out and then move from there and say, it's kind of like if you want to have your own practice and you want to be an MD, but you want to be more functional. Well, you still have to go to med school first, and then you can kind of backfill your own education. And so that was kind of the scenario.
And I still agree with what Chef James said, because I believe that if you and with Sophia, who we're talking about right now, our daughter, she has a lot of that, what Chef was talking about being like unlocked, where I can do that. I can make the hummus. I can make the pesto. I can make a pizza dough from scratch and it's amazing. Or I can take a piece of meat and visualize how I can cook it in different ways. Or again, I wasn't much of a baker, as you can tell by the way I'm talking right now. But these pastry artists that like they can look at something and see it and visualize it and create it. And there's a lot of that confidence that gets unlocked in culinary school, in my opinion. So coming out of culinary school, immediately I don't feel threatened by, can you cook this? I just don't feel it. Working in restaurants, I upped my pace by times 10. It's just you get a lot of the know-how of how to make certain foods from scratch from start to finish in culinary school. But in a restaurant, it's like you're going to feel the disappointment of letting everyone down. You got servers, you got whoever's running the pass. You got all these people that are going to be so disappointed in you if you can't get this right. Not to mention if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
Additionally, if there's waste, and there's just so much disappointment that you feel in restaurants, at least from what I remember. Additionally, there's like, that screwed experience that you're talking about. I feel like if you were successful in a restaurant, you never really felt that. You never actually were quote unquote screwed. Like you figured it out, right? And there's something in a restaurant where it's like you burned that one and you're quote unquote screwed right now, but like you're either gonna quit right there and walk out the back door and drop your apron, right? Or you're gonna like get another one on there and you're gonna baste it. You're gonna get that thing cooked in time to where somehow you get home at the end of the day and you're like, I did it.
Yeah, I got through it. Like you're gonna learn to how I would say is like you're gonna learn whether you can handle the heat or not.
Yeah.
It literally and figuratively, obviously. But the thing about what's interesting about restaurants as well is like a lot of times what you learn in school, if you go to certain, you kind of mentioned this before we started recording, Joey, is like you'll go to a restaurant and they'll do it totally different. So sometimes they don't like that you've gone to a culinary school. The only thing they like is if they want you to have knife skills. That's really it. So they want to know, they want you to be able to, like, if I say cut this size dice, or if I use certain French words to, explain what I want done, that's what they want. They want you to know the terminology and the knife skills, but that's kind of it. Because everything else is very specific to the chef or to the restaurant. But I still go back to what's the desired outcome, because like you said, Liz, when you started saying this, you were like, well, my daughter thinks she may want to run a bakery business. And as I said earlier, knowing how to bake and running a baking business are two completely different things. And the biggest mistakes people make is they think, well, I know how to bake, that means I know how to run business. Like, no, you don't. So in my judgment, it would be like, well, which is it? Do you want to bake or do you want to learn how to run a business? Because if you want to learn how to business, let's do an online business course.
Yeah.
And then, because the baking, there's two kind of pieces to when you cook. There's one is your passion for it, and then the other is your proficiency at it. And they don't always go hand in hand. And you definitely don't want to kill someone's passion for anything, right? So if someone enjoys baking because it's a stress relief, because it's a way for them to express how they feel for the person they're baking for, then they probably should create a business. You know what I mean? Because you're going to kill your love for baking. What you probably want to do is actually like partner with someone who does do the business side and you get to just do the baking. But even then, you're not going to know who you're baking these for. So now you might already right away lose a certain edge or a certain love of what you're doing. I think anytime we monetize what we love, we challenge ourselves to really redefine how we love it, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of it is of like, I just want to learn how to bake. And if that's the case, then yeah, doing some kind of baking course. And I wouldn't worry too much about the ingredients because it's not that different from what we were talking about around kids and household versus out of the household. We all need contrast, right? And particularly with cooking, we need to have a baseline. So right now, your home is a baseline for their food and for their sensibilities, right? But in the culinary world, they need to know, like, how do you make bread with flour before they go to how do you make gluten-free bread? You know what I'm saying? Like you almost need to know one because that is like it's a basic chemistry. And so you need to know that before you get niche with it. Like you don't want to go niche because then you're going to miss out on the basics. You want to master the basics and then go niche from there. At least that's my thought. And I know some people go the opposite, but I think that when we come in, it's like when we get too locked in on our perspective, we miss out on really deep learning. We may always cook gluten-free, but you learn so much from understanding, well, how to do sourdough or how to do, work with white flours and the different weights of those flours and the different grind sizes. You learn so much. And I know that's probably not the example you would give. You would give different examples for ingredients, but I'm just using, gluten-free versus standard bacon as an example.
Yeah. No.
I think this even opens up a bigger conversation that I think we've touched on a lot. And if I were to reframe it a little bit, it's that I think everybody should really learn to cook. And I think the way that you, Chef James, broke it up with, man, there's restaurants that really desire you to have mechanics, right? They just want you to have mechanics. Can you come in here really proficient and getting things done quickly on prep during prep time, and then all the techniques, we're going to teach you those, right? And when it comes to cooking in your home, you really need to kind of have a base layer of mechanics, and then you need to learn a set of techniques that you're comfortable with. And that is so important for, I believe, being able to take control of your own health and wellness when it comes to nutrition. Because if you don't have those, so whether you are investing in your kids by teaching them about food early on in their life, or you're just in the kitchen with them, or you're sending them to a school, whatever that might look like, I think that does unlock some confidence and some abilities that can set you up for success, to help you be more capable of being successful, and also to understand more about the foods that you're eating, whether it be junk or not.
What makes something junk?
I just think
that's not a bad thing to learn.
I just think it's so important.
And it's not just based on how does it feel in your body, but it's like, okay, if I make a Twinkie on my own, in my own home, what are the ingredients in that?
Mm-hmm.
How do I do it? Is it hard? Does it turn out similarly? Right now, let's compare it to what's the ingredients in a store-bought Twinkie, right? And then you just see the difference. And it's like, well, wait a second. We used 5 ingredients for those cookies, but the store-bought cookies got 10. Like, what are those other ingredients, and why did they do that? And that opens up a whole new perspective and way of looking at food. In a certain regard too, and this is a whole other conversation that people have a lot, which is like, well, you're gonna have junk, and obviously junk is a judgment word, right? So what is junk to me might not be junk to someone else, so I'm aware of that. But if you're gonna have junk, it's far better in my judgment to have just have the real cookie, but make it from scratch, make it from home. Don't worry about all these fake sugars and whatever weird ingredients that some of these people are using to try to make it seem like they're eating a dessert without eating a dessert. It's like, just eat the dessert, but kind of take ownership of how it feels in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Stop trying to look for that magic pill that's going to allow you to do everything you want without any outcome, without any effects on your health or your body. It's it just doesn't exist.
Man.
Yeah, that's good. I want to hear what Pluck is up to today, what you kind of are excited about at Pluck, and take us there.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful with the community we're building. As you and I mentioned earlier, we met very early on when Pluck had first started. I think we had one product at the time, which is our original.
Yeah.
It's our yellow bag. We now have 3 other products, so 4 total. And I'm really proud of those products. Something that's you actually did a really great job of articulating it, but something that's very different from Pluck, from other spice blends. Well, the obvious thing is that ours has organ meats, right? But it's actually deeper than that. Most seasonings, the first ingredient is salt. And they do that because salt's cheap and it's the predominant ingredient, and it's actually much larger ingredient than people even realize. So in many ways, when you buy blends in the store, what you're getting is salt with seasoning. Pluck, the 4th ingredient is salt. So with Pluck, you're getting seasoning with salt. And I know it's a minor, it's a minor play on words, but it's a huge outcome, huge different outcome, because the flavor profile is so different in Pluck than you're going to get with any other seasoning, not only from that umami taste of the organ meats, but also just the boldness of flavor.
Yeah.
Because our first ingredient is onion. The second ingredient is the organ meats, which we use 5 of them. It's freeze-dried powdered liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. We use those 5 because they all have different properties and different importance. And like one thing that I always point out to people is like, so pancreas, natural enzyme, digestive enzyme. So anyone that's struggling with digestion, when you put Pluck, not only are you adding food, you're adding functional nutrition, but you're also getting support with your digestion. So it's very like multifaceted. I'm so like, I've kind of come to learn that my mission with this company is really to bring whole animal to people's diets or to their tables as easily and deliciously as possible. And so I'm really excited to kind of introduce other parts of the animal. We're going to have a brain product coming, which I'm so excited about, because brain is something that we used to eat. And I mean, even like grandparents used to have it with their eggs, it was something that was in the diet. And then mad cow happened and people got so scared away from it. But mad cow is not related to sick animals. It's related to what they were feeding those animals to make them sick. And so I'm excited to bring that. I'm excited to bring other species. We're working on a whole sardine line. So it's not going to just be like the fillet. It's going to be the bone, the head, and it's freeze-dried and powdered. And we're going to make like seasonings that would go really well with that kind of fishy flavor. So I'm super excited to bring that to the table, because I really do think fish is important. I'm not just an all beef guy. I really believe in other species as well. We're going to have a limited run of bison at one point. I hope to eventually do elk as well. We're going to do poultry too down the road, and try to use even like the chicken feet and different parts of that chicken that people are not eating that are very high in nutrients, like the feet are very high in collagen, for example. So lots of exciting things, but I think I'm most excited though just about the building community and the feedback we get that we're supporting families and kids, and like parents keep telling us, I feel so much better knowing my kids are getting organ meats and they're not making a fuss. Or someone recently told me how their daughter was dealing with had kind of this chronic illness for a while, and she wouldn't eat anything, and we just met just a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, here, take some Pluck, see if you can start getting in her food and if it makes changes. And she said she immediately noticed that her daughter was no longer feeling as sick. Like immediately. And I was like, holy moly. And she's like, I don't know if it was a Pluck, but she's been in this state for months. And then I gave her the Pluck, and the next day she had more energy.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. And then another father was like, my kid was born with skin issues. We couldn't do the pharmaceutical thing because they weren't helping. I had heard organ meats could be helpful, but she was too young to give capsules. So I heard about Pluck, gave her Pluck, and it went away. And I was like, oh, like, so I'm learning with everyone else as the powers of what this product can provide and give to people. I just knew that I was not eating organ meats as much as I wanted to be. I knew that I wasn't getting them in my kids, and I knew that I needed to figure that out, and that's why I did it. So I'm just so grateful.
I love it. You're giving people such an easy on-ramp, such an easy entry into the real food space by giving them something that's delicious and functional. Do you have like recommendations for the amount of seasoning that you would be putting on this? Can you season all 3 meals with Pluck? Because it does have this functional nutrition bit, is there ever worry about over seasoning? Talk to us about like portion control.
Yeah, I think that absolutely there can be, you can go into danger zones if you have too much of certain nutrients and vitamins. The beautiful thing though is that when you're eating it, so we have kind of a lingual neural response. So it happens through our mouth, through our taste. It happens from our senses. but we have a biological communication system that's been developed, hundreds of thousands of years. We're basically Homo sapien body, and that's about a 300,000-year-old body, right? So it's been developed over time, this communication pathway of like when you eat certain foods, your body telling itself how much more it should eat or how less it should eat. And it also sometimes will inform you about what foods. Like sometimes if you were in the wild and you put something bitter in your mouth, it was like your body, like I don't know if anyone's ever tried to eat like a black walnut off the ground. Well, it's like it's incredibly bitter, and it just immediately your taste buds are like, nope, no, stop. And if you keep it going, your mouth actually starts to get numb, right? So that is your body communicating like, this is not in the state that it's in. This is not. I think I said black walnuts, but I think it's actually it could be actually walnut. I just remember there was a nut that was falling in our neighborhood that I thought was one thing, and so we brought it home to try to roast it, and I went to eat it, and that's what happened. And I did some research. I'm like, oh no, that's the poisonous version. You know what I mean? Like, but what's so fascinating about that is that my body told me that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it didn't let me go further. It shows up too, like in our grip. So when we're lifting things that are too heavy for our body to handle, we'll lose our grip. So there are these communication pathways that we innately we're born with. And marketing in the food industry confuses it, but we still have it. And so the more that we can eat these foods, I believe, the better you'll be. So that's why I love Pluck in its form, because you can eat it versus swallowing a capsule. And I do believe that if you're eating it, your body will stop you. Like it will taste different. And we can think of salt as an example. Like if I put salt in your tongue, it might taste good the first time, but if I put it on 2 or 3 times, it literally starts to taste different and your body starts to reject it. And the same thing would happen if you're getting too much iron in your diet. The organ meats will taste more and more metallic. And so you'll want to pull back. Or you'll have days in the month, particularly if you're a woman, where you want it more, you crave it more. And then some days where you crave it less. But the beauty is when you eat it, you get to follow your body's communication about what it needs. But in terms of like the products we have, so we have the 4. One of them is Pure, which is just organ meat. So Pure, when you have a organ and you freeze dry it, you have a raw organ, it's about 100% organ, you freeze dry it, you go down to about 20%. So it's incredibly concentrated. 1 teaspoon of Pure is equal to about 2 ounces of organ meat.
Wow.
And 2 ounces would be almost like, half of your palm, right? So huge difference. And so right there, I always caution people with Pure. I'm just like, I don't think you need more than a teaspoon a day, but as long as you're eating it, your body will kind of tell you. With the seasonings, those are not 100% blends, right? Because it's seasonings with, it's got Redmond real salt in it, it's got organic spices and herbs, and then it's got the organ meat. And we're always seeing if we can increase the limit of the organ or increase the amount of organ meat, but we don't want to go too high because Pluck is a gateway. Like those seasonings to me are a gateway. Like if organ meat is a gateway to nutritional abundance, Pluck is the gateway to organs. And so I never want it to be like where you're tasting the organ meats too strong. So right now we use about a 17% of it, and I hope to get to 20. But I don't think I'll be able to go much beyond that as a gateway. But I always tell people, like, you can add more Pure to it if you want. You can increase the amount you use, but you'll never go into a danger zone with that because you're getting micro dosing of the organ meats frequently, which is cumulative effect, which is, for my money, and this is how we started the whole podcast, for my money, that's how I want my food to be. It's like particularly this kind of nutrition. If I'm going to get organ meats in, I want to get it in little amounts every day because I know that's going to be a cumulative effect. Because if I know that from me, and I believe this is how most humans are, when we go to extremities, it's not sustainable. So like if you're someone who's like, well, you're hunters, right? So you'll sometimes get the organs from the animal you're hunting. And if you're someone who's like, oh, we're having liver tonight, it's like, okay, you did that, but you're probably not going to do it the next night, nor would you have to. But my point is you may only do that once a month, if that.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas if you're using Pluck, the seasoning, you can use it daily. You can put it on anything, as you mentioned earlier, like popcorn, cheese, toast, any meat, oysters, fish, whatever you want. I mean, it literally goes on anything. Salad. Um, you're just getting a little bit, but you're getting it frequently. And to your point, you can use it on every meal and you'll still be okay. And there will be days where you're like, you know what? I want more. And there'll be days when you're like, I'm not going to put it on. And I think you should trust that, because that's
Yeah.
probably your body saying, like, I don't need the organs today. I also find, like, with kids, I get this comment all the time. Like, parents are like, oh, when we run out of Pluck, my kid starts crying. I'm like, okay, that's cool that they like it, but I actually think that's an indication of their nutrient deficiency.
They need it. They're
Yes.
relying
And they
on
know
it.
it, and they know that they need it.
Wow.
It's the same reason why when I was a young kid, I used to take bites out of the butter. It's like I knew I needed that fat. I knew I
Yeah.
needed it, right? Our kids know more than we give them credit for. They're not as heady as we are.
Mm-hmm.
They're just following their physical, kind of inclinations. And usually those inclinations are more right than they're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I've never considered that when you are eating something, you kind of have that like feedback loop of my palate is kind of reminding me what is too much. That's why I never worry about over consuming salt, but yet I portion it differently every day. You're right. It totally depends on consuming it versus taking it in a capsule where you're removing that sort of like language between you and your body. That's so good.
It's so true. And honestly, if I can help people get back to their innate knowledge of what their body needs, I believe we're going to be in a much better place. Because right now, we're like the only species in the entire world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we, and there's like over, 8 million species in the world. So we're the only one that doesn't know how to eat.
That's so true.
Right? So that tells you everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very sobering.
As I'm getting hungry even just talking about this, Chef James, where can people find Pluck? Where can they find you? Where can they look you up?
So eatpluck.com is our website. We have recipes, lots of really cool stuff on there, but that's where you can buy. You can also go to Amazon, and you'll find us on socials at Eat Pluck, and I'm at Chef James Berry.
Awesome. I love it.
I dig it. Yeah, definitely go check that out. Find yourself some organ meat seasonings. And man, Chef James, thank you so much for coming on today. What an outstanding conversation. I feel like we popped all around, so I can't wait to listen to this back and come up with what the show notes and name of this episode will be. But a lot of wisdom, a lot of wisdom shared, and a lot of enjoyable conversation. I'm sure we'll be hanging out and talking to you soon.
Yeah, I would love that. And thank you for all that you're doing in terms of what you're educating and just introducing to people. I think I really am a big believer that we need exposure to different things to understand what we have or don't have. And without that contrast, you don't change. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, it's an honor for us. So anyways, thank you so much, James. Have a good one. And with that, Chef James has left the virtual chat, and I'm starving.
It's always a risk you run when you record with a chef and you talk food the entire time.
Hey, friends, just so you know, we didn't talk about it just there, but we have a discount code with Pluck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Homegrown.
Yes.
So if you go buy some Pluck Homegrown, it gets you 15% off. Get yourself some of that organ meat seasoning.
Highly recommend their original flavor. It's so good, and it's like the best popcorn seasoning. My kids love it. I've had it on eggs.
We're big popcorn people.
We are. It's just such a cheap and easy, and you can find organic popcorn pretty easily. So
it's good to go.
It's a good snack. Plus, you can put all the butter you want on it, and you don't even feel bad about it.
Go follow him on social media for those recipes. I'm sure Chef James has all kinds of content on there too. Go check him out. Super cool person. I'm sure he would definitely talk you up and answer questions if you have them. Big fan. I'm sure we'll be talking and hanging out with him soon. Maybe seeing him at Polyface if I get the invite. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the invite.
I
someday.
haven't been back in a few years. We'll have to make another trip.
Listen, friends, if you've been around the show for a while, you know about all the things we've got going on. But in case you're new here and you don't know what we've got going on, we've got all kinds of cool added benefits to you that we can give you, some of which are free, some are paid. Some of those free things to you that we've created, we have a raw dairy guide, get you in the game, understanding what raw dairy is all about. If you're scared of raw dairy, you don't understand it, or you hate it and you hate me right now for talking about it, you can go find our raw dairy guide at www.homegrowneducation.org,
Yes.
our website.
Mm-hmm.
Also have a sourdough guide on there to get you in the sourdough game if that's something that you're interested in doing.
For free.
For free. We also have a paid subscription situation with our Substack. We create content on there, more of like our current events, things that we're thinking, what's going on in our household, how are we engaging this content that we're working with, and or new developments in our real food journey. Substack at Homegrown. Is that how you'd find it?
Yeah. Go to Substack and then you type in the little search bar, Homegrown Education will pop right up.
We have a link to it in our Instagram bio as well at homegrown_education. You can follow us and or find that link there. We have products that are amazing on shopth.com. What's your favorite product you're using regularly right now?
Dish soap. I use it every single day. Dish soap with the horsehair brush, so it's like zero plastic.
You going degreaser or regular?
Currently I only have the regular bars.
Okay.
I'm cool with either.
Mm.
I do think in the winter times I like just a little bit extra of moisturizing for my hands because I do so many dishes every day. Not that the degreaser dries out my hands, but it's just if I'm going to be already prone to like cold, dry skin, I want to go with the lard dish soap.
Yeah.
So it's so funny though, because I think even just having solid dish soap is such a paradigm shift. At first, you're like, what do I do? Do I rub the bar on the dishes? Like, you almost forget how soap works, that you need like a lathering tool. And for me, my favorite is our horsehair brush because it lasts so long. We had our first one for 2+ years. It is ethically made. It's a small company in Germany. Literally, the bristles are horsehair. You're hearing that correctly. There's no plastic. The handle is wooden. If you want to replace your wooden dish brush head sooner than 2 years, because you're not quite as scrappy as Joey and I are, then you can absolutely do that. And they're just, I like when I have to use something every single day for like 365 days a year. I want functionality and simplicity to like just be seamless. And for me, it's the dish setup.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also using our sourdough proofing baskets. So, that's a weekly thing that I love. And our coffee I'm drinking every day. I recently totally like forgot about our orange cranberry tea. And then we had it the other night.
Oh
and
my
I was
gosh.
like, this is the best for this like upcoming fall winter vibes of just like put a little honey in it, drink it hot. I gave it to Ruthie iced. She loved it.
It's just like a straight up treat.
Yeah, it's bright
Crazy.
pink in color. It's gorgeous, like all organic ingredients, whole cranberries in there. It's got like a citrusy, sweet. Oh, it's delicious. So yeah,
If you haven't gone to shopth.com to get yourself the sourdough proofing baskets, which you glossed over, they're just better. They fold up. They're all fabric. They're incredible. You can wash them. You can store them in drawers if you like once they're perfectly dry.
Yes.
Quick notice there, but they're not going to take up a bunch of space. They're not going to be splintering or getting disgusted. They're just amazing. They're way better than having a whatever you would call that like weird wicker looking thing.
The rattan.
They're just better. They are. So check them out. shopth.com, proofing baskets, the coffee and tea, no-brainer decision. It's just the best. Yeah, shopth.com. Hazelmeyer Goods. We got all your stuff for you there. Ready to rock and roll. And also solid dish soap. It's just the best. I had somebody send me a message recently that said, I love the solid dish soap, but sometimes I'm just in a hurry. And so I use the liquid because it's just faster. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. Because let me talk through the situation that I ran in my head. So if you're going to use dish soap for one dish, maybe the liquid's faster because you just pour it on the dish and then you start using some water and it suds right away, right? Let's say you've got 13 to 20 dishes. Okay, so your first dish, you're going to get ahead of the game. But with the dish soap, because it's the applying and scrubbing is so much faster once you get into the game.
Once you're lathered.
If you're having to keep grabbing the bottle of dish soap,
Yeah.
even if it's just like every other time or a couple times, like carry over, I'm aware of how soap works, right? Dish bar is pretty efficient.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like really effective, because it is really effective and, natural and not disgusting, right? But there's some major efficiency when you're doing large dish, I actually like low key. I like it for one dish. So, anyways, I did gently disagree with the comment, and my comment back was, tell you what, I'll give you a nice big old blue bottle of dish soap, and I'm gonna use my dish bar, and let's race.
Let's race.
I was like, let's just get as many dishes as you want, whatever dishes you want. Let's race. I'm in. So maybe I'm just too competitive, but anyways, I would totally race. And I think it's just better. Anyways, shopth.com, go find that there. If you want to find our Substack, you should do that. You can find that. If you want to find us on Instagram, you can do that as well. I'm at Joey Hazelmeyer. Elizabeth is at Liz Hazelmeyer, and at homegrown_education. And until next time, that's a wrap.